Oh, Sovereignty, Sovereign Tech Sweaties. It's time to get sweaty. I tell you, this is another part of that exclusive Patreon content. Only Patreon subscribers get access to this content. I've got a Q&A special here for you. It's going to be a great time. Not going to be a terribly long one, but I'm going to get to your questions. And there are questions actually that I know are from Patreon subscribers. So this is where you get it. This is how Q&A is going to work from now on. Just sign up for Patreon, or, there's other methods. If you really want to, donate regularly through Bitcoin, using Bitcoin or through some other means, we can definitely, obviously I'll work that out with people. But the Q&A now is largely, unless it's a big deal, it's largely just for Patreon sponsors. So thank you so much for everybody that has signed up in the past couple of weeks. And of course, thank you so much to everybody that signed up. Honestly, some of you have been Patreon subscribers for months, if not, however long I've had Patreon. It might even be over a year now. So I really appreciate that. I'm really honored. And I'm glad to finally be able to get this kind of content out to you. So, again, that's how Q&A is going to be. We've got some other stuff lined up. If you notice when you go to the Patreon page, it's patreon.com/sovereigntech. Generally, if you're hearing this, unless you're like a Bitcoin subscriber, you're already there because that's how you get access to this content. Everything just shows right up on the Patreon page. It's patreon.com/sovereigntech, and you can find it. And if you look there, there's a goal set, and I'm going to set other goals too. But the first goal that I had set on there is that if we can get it up to, on Patreon or through whatever means, if it can get up to $500 a month, then not weekly, a month. If we can get up to $500 a month, I will be able to afford to do a second episode of Sovereign Tech every single week. And once I have that, going, it's not just going to be like, sometimes it'll be just like another episode of Sovereign Tech. Other times it could be a full-on special, or, maybe a more single topic, or even interviews, not necessarily with sponsors, but just, interviews in general that I could do, for the second episode a week. And I'll set, goals for what it would take to have Sovereign Tech 3-4 times a week. And maybe some of them would even be shorter shows. We'll see. But anyway, I just want you to know that that's there, and everybody that's already donating through Patreon, and people are donating outside of Patreon, you're really a big part of making that a reality, of allowing for that. And I'm really, really honored. So in case you haven't noticed, I am on location. So if the sound is a little odd, I'm using the classic H1, which the very first special Patreon exclusive content that you heard last week was also on the H1. But this time it's just me. I'm just holding it. No lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy here this time around. I will still be releasing the other 4 parts of the hentai special there with Fence for Minerva, and we've got a lot more of that to get through too. But all of that will come out. That'll all come out as a bunch. It's not something I'm going to delay because I'd love to have multiple pieces of audio coming out every week for Patreon-only subscribers. And it's not always going to be long stuff. But anyway, here's a Q&A episode for you. Hope you don't mind the audio. I do know that the questions that I will be answering, pretty much how I want this to work, is that Patreon subscribers, in fact, through Patreon, you can do this. You can email me too. You can go to contact.zog.ninja and you can get in touch with me that way. But actually, if you're a Patreon subscriber, you can send me a message through Patreon itself. Patreon has its own little messaging system. You can ask me a question through that, and then I will answer them on the show. And it's a great way for me to know, that it's coming from a Patreon subscriber in the first place, because I kind of want to confirm that it is. It doesn't mean I won't do questions here and there on Sovereign Tech either. If it's a big enough one, every question is important in my opinion, and I'm honored that people want my opinions on things. But if it's a really big one, I'll do it on a show. But otherwise, I like being able to offer you, value for value. You're giving me value. I get to give you value, by answering your questions and all that. And then you really, by being a Sovereign Tech subscriber, you really, afford me the time, to do this and to dig deep. So anyway, like I said, I don't want this to be, too terribly long. Just getting this content out there for you. And then we've got, I have like 5 other episodes that I will be releasing over time. But I wanted to get a Q&A out this week. It was really important to me. And I'll get another one out next week too. So anyway, On location here, let's get into. Why don't we just break right into it? Let's get into some of these sections. But before I get into that, not every Patreon special is going to be recorded on the H1. Most of the time, I will be in the studio. In fact, we're trying to build. Part of the reason I'm doing Patreon is so that we can build a second studio, which will allow me to get out a lot more content, a lot more Sovryn Tech content, some other special stuff I have cooking, along with also more Audio the Ancients work. So we are trying to have a second studio done up. We pretty much need a mixer, and that's actually, if you go to wishlist.zog.ninja, the mixer we need is listed there. But that's kind of the big deal that we need. We're and other microphones that help, but that's kind of the big one. So anyway, if you want to help with that, please feel free. But believe me, you're a Patreon subscriber or you're a donator in some other form or fashion. You're doing enough. So I'm not asking for more. I'm not that kind of guy. But anyway, let's get into these questions. And I'm going to start off. All right, here's a good one. Let's start off with this. Here's a technical one, and then I want to get into a fun one, a real fun one. Hey Brian, I've heard you talk about how you torrent on your phone. Yay for unlimited data. I've never torrented on my phone before, and wondering with a good data plan, unlimited of course, can you download all the usual things, comics / movies / games / music, etc., at a decent rate? Also, I have been torrenting forever and have never used a VPN. Am I pressing my luck? I know a VPN is a good thing to have. I've just had trouble setting one up and never tried again since. I haven't heard of anyone getting busted for illegal downloading in years. Is that even still a thing? I've just been considering trying out relying on an unlimited data plan versus being ripped off by Comcast. And then he goes on to say, congrats on 4 years of Sovryn Tech, man. There aren't many opportunities to chant this that it actually matters. So 4 more years, 4 more days. I saw 4 more years and many more, of course. Boy, does everybody remember I guess it's the RNC this week, right? What a train wreck, like any politics. And does anybody remember when Schwarzenegger, I think it was when George W. was going for re-election, right? And Arnold Schwarzenegger came up and he said, 4 more years, 4 more years. It's classic. I mean, travesty at the same time. But anyway, so to answer this question, this is an important one. And there's multiple aspects to this that really need addressing. First off, if you're going to torrent your phone, I guess to answer the major thrust of it is yes. Through, you don't have to be connected to Wi-Fi. Through 4G LTE, you can actually get a great download rate. In fact, it used to be, to some degree for me, as long as you have unlimited data, it was far superior. My LTE connection was far superior to my to my normal ISP connection at the house. So I would use it to do that. Of course, the other issue you have to consider is that the average smartphone doesn't have a whole ton of space. So like if you want to download every episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, you're kind of going to, you're going to run into a little bit of an issue with that, right? Because, what is it like? I don't know what size that would be, 80 gig, whatever. You get my point. It's said to be a large amount. So that's an issue too. Of course, a lot of phones can handle a micro SD card that could hold 128 gig or something, and then maybe that's not even really an issue. But it's a great way to do things. I love setting up. I've done this before. I mean, I love setting up my my smartphone, load CyanogenMod on it, and just plug it into the wall and turn on the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi hotspot setting when you have it rooted. You don't want to pay extra for that from any telecom. That's ridiculous. And usually they can do a pretty good job of reaching, kind of anywhere in the house, and just using it. I mean, to some degree, depending on who you're getting the plan through, like that might be the cheapest way to get internet out there, especially like internet with good speed. That's totally possible. The app I recommend, if you're using Android, there's 2 ways you can go about this. If you have access to the Play Store, I recommend T-Torrent Pro, I think it's called now, but T-Torrent, just T-T-O-R-R-E-N-T. Maybe I'll mention it perhaps in the show notes for this episode. But T-Torrent is the one you want for that. If you don't want to use the Play Store and you want to use like F-Droid, I recommend Qubit Torrent. They have a full client. I recommend that client for any operating system that you have. Qubit Torrent is my personal favorite. It's just Q and then the word BitTorrent. I'll put that in the show notes too. So that's one that you can get. I mean, the mobile client's not the greatest. It's certainly not as full featured as torrent is. But if you're doing like a full dark Android setup, say, and you don't have the Google Play Store on there, and good on you, it's a major security hole. Then that's the one I would grab. So, as far as the viability with that goes, yeah, I mean, that works great, especially with torrent. You can do all kinds of, there's a million settings that you can do to where, make sure it goes right to the SD card. It doesn't take up any phone storage, things like this. It really works very well for that. As far as the VPN goes, so, well, all right, this is twofold. Most VPNs I am finding to be very questionable as far as their utility, and it's questionable to really, to where paying for one, I think is worth anyone's while. Private internet access is probably the best one out there right now. That's a PIA, and you could check out. You can get private internet access, and I think they have a client for that. The other one that's pretty good for Android is Disconnect. Yeah, it's just Disconnect. Disconnect.me. Now this one's not available in the Play Store because it breaks some of Google's rules. So this is one you can get just about anywhere. And I think you can pay for it with Bitcoin too. But Disconnect.me is another great VPN service for that. I haven't really heard of the case because I don't think mobile providers even want to admit that people could do this with their phone. I haven't heard the case where anybody that was torrenting with their smartphone got in any kind of trouble. And I think the reason that happened is, like I said, if there was a story where somebody got arrested for torrenting, quote unquote, illegal, and I say that, I put that in air quotes, illegal content from a website, from a torrent site, if they were doing that, if they admitted that in the news, suddenly a whole shit ton of people would start doing it. So I think they're being really quiet about that, and so they just kind of ignore it. So it's there's an advantage in that. But that said, Verizon recently, and this is just in the past week, they have started to say they are going to go after accounts that are, quote unquote, abusing unlimited data, which, if the plan is called fucking unlimited data, it is literally, and I'm using that word accurately, it is literally impossible to abuse unlimited. This is the same bullshit that happened with OneDrive Gate, with Microsoft, where they said, well, yeah, we were offering unlimited data storage with OneDrive, but some people were abusing it. No, fucker, it's unlimited. You can't abuse unlimited, right? So that's going on. So even the ability to get an unlimited plan is becoming far more difficult. And I think AT&T also, this has been going on for a while, where you could be grandfathered into their classic unlimited plans. I think even they have said, yeah, we're not doing unlimited anymore, not what they've said. They have been throttling people that use more data than they want you to. So that's problematic in and of itself. Sprint has also made claims that they will go after people that are throttling things. Bottom line is, VPN aside, it's very difficult to find a really good unlimited plan, to do this with. If you can, awesome. And if you're not down, if you're not, like when I was with Sprint, I was doing 30, 40 gig, a month as far as using it. And I was fairly certain there was points where I was getting throttled. I use Straight Talk now. I don't, and I use unlocked phones. I don't use Sprint anymore. But it was certainly great while it lasted. So if you can get in on some kind of unlimited plan where it works for you, by all means, it really works great. And I don't even really think you need a VPN. The other VPN option I mentioned Disconnect.me, and I mentioned private internet access. I don't really recommend ProXPN anymore. A lot of people have been having issues with it, myself included. So I don't know what's going on over there. They've done a lot of things right in the past, so maybe you want to stick with them. But there have been speed issues as late, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having the much faster, torrent speed, right, with your smartphone. The other one I would recommend would be riseup.net. Now, this is important because, say you get a RiseUp account, and if you go there, I'll leave that to you to figure out how you feel about getting a RiseUp account. I have one. I love it. RiseUp.net offers a full suite of services. They offer a great email service. They offer all kinds of things, okay? even though it's free, because it's designed for activists, okay, and anarchist activists and all this, even though it's free, and you could say, well, why would I pay for a VPN when I can get a free one from RiseUp? Please, okay. The amount of things and the amount of good that RiseUp does for the world, donate to them, and they will take Bitcoin. Donate to them. If you do get a RiseUp account, you got to jump through some hoops to be able to do that. Okay, but that's another VPN option. That's probably the best VPN out there, just bar none. I'm not saying it's the fastest. They only have a couple servers, okay, but these are people who get it, right? That they understand IP, they understand the problem with IP and the problem with a whole bunch of this shit. So I recommend that. There's some hoops to go through, and I know even though it's free, please do not be that person that takes advantage of that. Donate to them. I try to as much as I can. So anyway, just putting that out there. So VPNs are kind of worrisome. I mean, I'm not giving you legal advice. Don't say, well, the Golden Stallion said I could do this. I'm just saying that VPNs are kind of questionable right now, and I don't know if you're torrenting from, especially via your mobile data. I really don't know that it's necessary. I think telecoms are a little concerned about bringing that sort of thing up. And a lot of people aren't really getting busted. Now this is something I'll be talking about on Sovryn Tech this week. It'll be episode 185. But Kick-Ass Torrents was taken down, and it is still down. And from what I've done a little quiet asking around. Don't quote me on this anywhere, because whatever, just don't. But as far as I understand, it's probably not going to come back. So that's problematic. Where do you even go on your phone to be able to get your hands on torrents? Of course, Pirate Bay is still a thing, blah, blah, blah. You can use torrents.com. That's torrents with a Z at the end. That's kind of a meta search engine for torrents. That's really good. It's been around forever. But that's a problem in itself, is that, what are we going to, what are you going to do with, how are you even going to get torrents on there, right? Not that Kick-Ass Torrents, their website didn't work that well on a mobile platform anyway. So, but Kick-Ass Torrents is down. So now really the hard part in this whole gig is finding torrents. It's really, raises for me something that I'd really love to see on smartphones more, and that is Usenet clients. I know they exist, but something that really takes advantage of Usenet, I'm kind of hoping, I'll talk more about this in episode 185 of Sovryn Tech, but I'm kind of hoping that Usenet goes in, comes back into prominence a bit more, because they're not looking there. They don't want to draw. I don't think anybody wants to draw attention to it. It's good PR for the MPAA, the RIAA, for the U.S. government and all this stuff to take down torrent sites. Okay, it makes them look good for a lot of people. And it also, quote unquote, strikes fear into the hearts of people. Even though, like the emailer asked, are people still getting arrested for downloading stuff? These cases have dropped significantly. Running a torrent site, on the other hand, is still a very hot thing. It's still something that, that seems to be getting people into trouble. I do hope that some of these alternatives come to fruition, like Usenet and some others, maybe even RetroShare, things like this. Or of course, MadeSafe could come around. That's fine too. That way, because the government really, I don't think they want to highlight many more viable options for a lot of this stuff, because it just runs in, like Kazaa became popular. The idea of illegally downloading music became a thing largely because of the Metallica case. Not because people were doing it before, but because of the Metallica case itself. That's when it became like this big deal and this big thing that a lot of people were really doing. Anyway, I think a lot of these other options that either already exist. I mean, you can even, do file sharing through IRC, which is a great thing. I don't think they're going to want to talk about that if people end up going to that, because then, then people are going to be educated. Oh, there's other ways I can do this. I mean, a lot of people don't even know that actually Usenet is way better for, for file sharing than, and including for, quote unquote, illegal or copyrighted material than torrents are. I mean, it's not as easy, obviously, but as far as a lot of the options go, I mean, it's a better solution. I love using it. So anyway, that's the deal with the whole torrent thing. I think I spent quite a bit of time on that. But yeah, totally possible. And I think the whole concept of not paying for ISPs anymore is, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, that's really being a cord cutter, right? Like you really cut the cord at that point. So I find that to be, an interesting concept in and of itself. Though again, it is becoming harder and harder and harder to get actual, genuine, unlimited plans that you could use the internet, in a relatively heavy fashion, and it not be an issue. So anyway, that's that. Let's get into a fun one, and then maybe we can get into one more. I didn't realize it. I'm already running pretty long just on answering that question. But someone asked about. I don't remember if I mentioned this or if Stephanie mentioned it on a Sex and Science Hour or if it came up on Sovryn Tech. It might have been Sovryn Tech. But I brought up the Saved by the Bell, or one of us brought up the Saved by the Bell conspiracy. And yes, we're talking about the show Saved by the Bell, from the early, late 80s, early 90s, whatever. Mark Paul Gosselaar and all these guys. And the person pretty much asked, "Hey, I would love to hear about that, about that conspiracy." So, okay. So if you already know the show, Saved by the Bell, it has to do with a bunch of teenagers. Mr. Belding is their principal, right? And they're having to get through, various trials and tribulations of being a teenager in high school, or I think it started off maybe like in middle school or something, whatever. That's the idea here. And cracked.com, which I take or leave that site at times. Sometimes they bring up interesting stuff. I always appreciate the fact that they are the anti-hot take. A hot take in journalism or in blogging is that you have to, what's your take? It comes from that phrase. And a hot take is one that nobody else is mentioning. I mean, to some degree, honestly, Sovryn Tech is the king of hot takes in podcasting, because that's half the reason I do the show is I don't hear anybody else saying what I'm thinking, or at least not many people, right? And so crack.com is really good. I shouldn't say they're the anti-hot take, but they are really good at getting a real hot take. Like they love to just debunk whatever is going on around them. I don't like that they do it in top 10 lists or on top 5 lists or whatever. But they do put up some interesting stuff here and there. And so they had an article actually back in July 2012 that I'll quote from. And their point is that the character of Zach, who's kind of the, Mark Paul Gosselaar's character, which some would say is the lead character. Now, there's a ton of conspiracies around this, okay, but I'm going to start touching on this one. But their belief is that I think it's either after the first season or just from the get-go, the entire show is actually a dream. That Saved by the Bell is like it might all be like this really, like this dream world of a teenager that has experienced some really serious trauma. And there is some interesting evidence for this. And it's not the first time a television show has done that. There was in fact, a lot of television shows actually use this concept as a hook for an episode. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Joss Whedon's show there, was notorious for this. In fact, I still kind of believe that the whole thing was a dream. But there's an episode where, Sarah Michelle Gellar is Buffy. She wakes up in an insane asylum, effectively, and comes to find out that they're trying to convince her that everything was a dream. And the show ended kind of ambiguously, and actually I think Joss Whedon has never given a definitive answer on whether or not the entire Buffy the Vampire Slayer universe is just a dream of this, of Buffy herself. Which I think is kind of cool. Sometimes shows could take it a little too far, right? Like, didn't Dallas, wasn't there like the entire third season of Dallas or something? like at the end of the season or the beginning of the fourth season or whatever, the guy wakes up, gets out of the shower or whatever, finds out it's all a dream. So sometimes that's been taken very literally, and you don't even know until like the following season or something. But Saved by the Bell, you're never really told if this is the case, but an interesting case could be made that the entire show is just one giant dreamland. And again, that's just one aspect of the conspiracy. But I'm going to read here, this is from crack.com, from their article, July 2012. Quote, "It's nothing more than the escapist fantasy of a disillusioned young man named Zach Morris. Oddities or failures, Tori, Kelly dumping him, are simply signs of his subconscious trying to break through. Any problems he has in real life disappear when he's in his dream world. And the show even tells us once every episode what Zach's real life is actually like in the theme song. The lyrics tell the tale of a day in the life of a high school student stumbling through an unpleasant world of consequence. He starts in a panic." And this is stallion breaking. And what they're doing is they're telling you the lyrics of the theme song to the show, how every show starts. Starts off with that bell, and then it goes into these lyrics. And let's read them because it's interesting. Quote, "By the time I grab my books and I give myself a look, I'm at the corner just in time to see the bus fly by." And then later in the song, "If the teacher pops a test, I know I'm in a mess, and my dog ate all my homework last night. Riding low in my chair, she won't know that I'm there. Riding low in my chair, she won't know that I'm there." As a summary of the show, the theme song makes no sense. Zach has never had a bad day at Bayside in his life, and that's the thing. Like, the song is describing this terrible day, and fortunately, they get saved by the bell, right? But it's saying, that you never ever see anything like that. So what the hell is the theme song talking about? And I'll read on here, quote, "He's never in a mess. Everything bounces off of him. If he's unprepared for a test, he doesn't ride low in his chair like some depressed teenager. He gets the teacher to turn the test into a bake-off and then wins the bake-off by cheating. It only starts to make sense when you look at the structure. The song begins with a bell taking the narrator out of his dream world. Quote, "When I wake up in the morning," this is from the lyrics of the song, "when I wake up in the morning and the alarm gives out a warning, the middle of the song," that's the opening. "The middle of the song takes us through a narrator's miserably realistic life at high school. But then at the end of the song, right before the show about Bayside starts, he gets saved by the school bell, which frees him to go home to a world where," reading on, "tomorrow it'll be all right. It's all right because I'm saved by the bell." Thus the song ends with Zach being released from the harsh realities of life by escaping to the one place where everything is all right for him, a place that exists in the border between today and tomorrow, the nighttime when you sleep. Each Saved by the Bell episode begins with a theme song that tells us what is literally happening in the real world in the time between episodes. Zach is riding low in his chair, not liking how he looks in the mirror, and generally eating shit like any other high school student. Then the song's chorus, and the title of the show, releases him to the fantasy world that both he and the show's audience like so much better than real school, the infinite dream world of Bayside High. That dream world constitutes every episode of Saved by the Bell, and it only exists in the mind of some awkward, pimply-faced version of Zach Morris who can't catch a break. And so anyway, there's an article. I'm actually reading some of this from an article by IlluminatiWatcher.com. So take it with a grain of salt. But the points are interesting. And I'll read a little bit more here. Seems plausible, right? I think so. It explains the show better than the claim that we're watching any sort of real experience in high school. Shouldn't be too surprising, since the show was an offshoot of the Illuminati-riddled Disney company who originally called it Good Morning Miss Bliss, which was at JFK High School originally, begging to be tied to conspiracy theories. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff here too, and part of the, I won't get into a lot of that, but the theme song isn't just kind of enough to explain it away. The theme song does get into, it might just be like the theme song might just be a call to action for anybody watching the show. Like I'll admit to that. Like it's interesting that the potential that the whole show is total BS. It's all made up in Zach Morris's head. In fact, in the first season of Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris is kind of a loser. Like, it's a very different show when you watch, and I'll admit, I watch Saved by the Bell all the time. Growing up, I mean, most people my age, I was born in 81. Most people my age did. It was on like every day, when you got home from school. And so, the first season, Zach Morris is kind of a loser, right? And actually there's a point like towards the end of the first season where I believe that in the episode he gets beat up. And so that's kind of the theory, is that is where suddenly this dream world kicks in. Is kind of at the end of the first season. That's the way some people, want to take that in. It's interesting, again, the theme song itself, I think, you have to add in more. The theme song isn't enough to take this theory all the way. I think the first season, definitely sets it up better as it all being some dream world, because then one day, whatever, Mark Paul Gosselaar becomes handsome and it all, and everything works out and the show is totally different and he's living the good life and never has a bad day. Now, that gets into, a side conspiracy, and that is that Mark Paul Gosselaar, the guy that played Zach Morris, actually died before the second season of Saved by the Bell, and that's why suddenly the show changes completely. Very, very scant evidence for that sort of thing, other than the fact that, suddenly he's this much better looking guy in a very short period of time. It seems that's about the evidence that they run with. I think other people, they say, may have died as well in some kind of car accident or something, with the show. But boy, if I'm boring you, don't hesitate to let me know, Patreon subscribers, with this. But I think it's an interesting thing. So anyway, when you take the first season, you take the opening theme song, it gives some weight to the idea that this whole thing is some kind of dream, and also, like I said, because if it's just the theme song, really the theme song could just be a call to action. It could just be an attractor to all the people watching the show. Because I would certainly admit, my middle school or high school career. Certain aspects of it really sucked, and you couldn't wait for the bell to go off to go home. So, you could really relate to the song and thus you watch the show, but then you really couldn't relate to anything going on in the show because, most people's high school life wasn't that wonderful. School in and of itself is tantamount to prison, and, who could possibly really have a good time doing that unless you like to act like one of the prison guards or you're a bully or something along those lines, right? So I'm not saying I buy this whole conspiracy theory. Now, you can get outside of that narrative of that this is all a dream, or, you can get into perhaps what's the reality around Disney's production of the whole thing. Of course, then, they get into that it was originally JFK High School. A lot of these things, are some kind, which JFK may be pointing fingers at Marilyn Monroe, which may be pointing fingers at the fact that all of these actors in this show were subject to MK Ultra, programming. So, real quick on MK Ultra, if you don't know about it, it's about creating, mind controlled agents, right? If you want to find out more about that, go to the School Sucks podcast. Listen to the Conspirathon series that I did with Brett and Stephanie on that. And there's episodes where we get into MK Ultra pretty deep. Okay, it would take me 2 hours to describe MK Ultra. But bottom line, MK Ultra, just real quick, is as far as, was it a CIA program? Yes, we know that it was something. As far as, is it still going on? This idea of trying to mind control people and create multiple personalities in people. We don't know that it's something that's still going on or to what effect it ever worked. But it was, when you go by the church hearings and all this stuff in the 70s, for certain that yes, something like, an MK Ultra thing did exist. If you want a fictional example of what it looks like, there's the movie American Ultra, which is really creepy. But that's a relatively new film with that. I think it had the woman from Twilight in it, and was it Eisenberg, the guy that did a terrible job of playing Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg maybe. I think he's in it too. It's a relatively new film, but you can get the idea of what MK Ultra is all about. So the theory would go is that all of these, a lot of Disney actors, this is a conspiracy theory that's out there. A lot of Disney actors, and this would include Britney Spears, a whole bunch of people, are actually some, they're trauma-based, mind-controlled slaves. And that's where the show, the idea that the show is a dream could take a very creepy turn. And some of the symbology, there's a lot of pyramid stuff. Sometimes you can see that stuff anywhere, right? But some of it lends itself to that. Perhaps some of the stories lend itself to that. The fact that despite the rampant rebellion that the teenagers generally engage, or that at least is the character of Zach, engage in on the show. The fact that whenever Mr. Belding, effectively puts the hammer down, they all listen. And so the idea is that Mr. Belding is this creepy, balding, older guy handler. And a handler is somebody that has the keys to control the mind control slave, the MK Ultra slave, right? So there's that aspect of it. There's the fact that, the Saved by the Bell, the ringing of the bell, like this Pavlov training, this trauma-based training and all this. And that's within the paradigm of MK Ultra slaves, that's sort of how they become that, is they go through various traumas. And that comes from having, like creating kind of a false reality where everything's great and then taking it all away. And that would fall into the basis of, actually, Zach's life sucks, but he goes into dreamland and everything's great. And that's how you create a trauma mind-controlled slave. So anyway, so a lot of that, fits into this. And then, when you look at some of the actors that were in the show, as far as like, were they actually, part of this trauma-based, mind control and all this stuff, the actress that played Lisa, there have been I'll admit it, there have been some strange videos lately where they run into her, and she just seems to be a mess. And I really sympathize. I mean, I feel terrible that anybody is ever in that kind of state. But, like, they just ask her very simple questions, and she is just off in la-la land. And it's creepy. It's like she's either drugged up or she, it's like she can barely even form a sentence. It's all very strange. And then you have Elizabeth Hurley. Was it Hurley? Who... She played the redhead in Saved by the Bell. Of course, she went out after she got done with Saved by the Bell, and there was the college years too, right? But what did she go off to do? She went and made Showgirls, the movie Showgirls. So that's it raises questions. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So here she's, she just gets, and this is true for a lot of these Disney actors. They just get done doing this really popular, insanely, the role models for children. They do these great children's shows and all stuff, and then suddenly they turn into Miley Cyrus. The modern Miley Cyrus, right? Where, they're sexualizing infantilism and, and all this different stuff. So, yeah, I mean, there are genuine oddities out there that happen with this stuff. So that's sort of the Saved by the Bell conspiracy, is that it's really, it's all about this, just this really addled teenager, and that it's all, it's really like all in his head, and that it may be representative of somebody that goes through, this trauma-based control, mind control and whatever. That's the gist of the, of the overall theory. So I probably talked about that a lot longer than needed. Of course, like I say, there's other theories within that too. There's the theories that, Mark Paul Gosselaar actually already died, when he was a kid, and they had to bring in somebody else to replace him and all this stuff. I mean, there's tons of them, but effectively they're saying, I mean, the basic gist is that Saved by the Bell is Illuminati High. That's Illuminati High School. That's sort of the idea. Anyway, let's get on to let's get for another question here. No, there's one about life extension. I actually want to do a whole show about that. Here's an interesting one. So the question is, I like the concept of Gotenna, pairing two phones without internet or cell service for text communication. But is there a tech that allows 2+ devices to group together and allows 1+ device in the group connection to the internet, so all the devices can piggyback on that connection and communicate with the wider internet? That would be really neat. All right, so for those that don't know, Gotenna, and I'll talk about it here. I've actually become really skeptical lately of talking about a lot of new projects, unless I really need to get to know the people within a project or who are offering a product. I've become really skeptical of talking about those on Sovryn Tech, because a lot of times I think I get emails from totally anonymous people that are just trying to get some free promotion and some free marketing. So since it's a Patreon episode, I am willing to talk about it, because I know it's not going to go get out any further really than my patrons. So I don't mind that, and it can't get used as some kind of marketing tool, at least not really. So Gotenna is this little device. It's very, very handy. I've been keeping an eye on this, and I've talked about it on Sovryn Tech in the past already anyway, but it is this idea of a little antenna that you can, it's about maybe 6 inches in length, and you can attach it to a backpack or something. It has a little belt loop, clasp that lets you attach it to things. And with that, you can pair it with other Gotennas. And using the Gotenna app on your phone, you can just send text communication. And I think it's only text at the moment, but you can just send text communication, between devices. And I think you can do more than just two. They sell them in pairs, but I think you can sync it with a bunch of them. And sometimes depending on the conditions you're in, it can go for miles. It's really quite a technology. I think it's very cool. I don't know how well it's taking off. I've been trying to get them as an actual sponsor of Sovryn Tech, but that hasn't happened yet. But I think it's a great idea. I agree with the emailer here. Just how cool it is. But as far as what they're asking for, like, is there a way that you could have where just one device is connected to the big bad internet, as I used to call it, and I still call it, but then everybody else is connected to that one device? Now, this is very similar to what Open Garden allows for. And in fact, they have a technology that I've mentioned on Sovryn Tech in the past called greenstone, which is literally looks like a little green stone, a little pebble, or well, bigger than a pebble. And you put it in your pocket, and it allows for Bluetooth connectivity to just bounce around, and everybody can kind of take advantage of it, like it worked like a Wi-Fi hotspot of sorts. But Open Garden, the app itself, can do what the emailer is kind of asking about here. Could you have something where one of them's connected, and then you just have, say, like Gotenna's or perhaps a Greenstone, and then everybody can connect through that? Yeah, Open Garden allows for that. I'm going to tell you, though, I'm going to warn you that as far as Open Garden itself, which also runs the app FireChat, I'm a little I've heard some things that are a little concerning within that company. For various reasons, I won't go into details on that. But I at this moment, I do not recommend the use, due to some recent things. I do not recommend the use of Open Garden or of FireChat. And I will bring this up in a Sovryn Tech because this is important to get out there. So this is totally possible. There's companies that have already tried it or that are kind of already doing it. As far as a really good company that's doing it, well, that still needs to happen. I think Gotenna the technology is on a great start. I think Gotenna, unfortunately, is probably patented. So we can't just, crack open their stuff and copy it. I mean, we could if we just, people just want to use it amongst themselves. But as far as something they could sell, obviously you'd run into some legal issues there. Not that I give a shit about laws. But yeah, I think that's really cool. That's definitely one of the dreams. Especially when you consider sort of with how I mentioned earlier, that Kick-Ass Torrents was shut down. If you were doing a local area network, which is effectively what we want here, but being able to do it, within certain distances that are perhaps greater than everybody sitting in a house, running a local area network and having all of that content to be able to share and all that stuff. I mean, as long as it's not getting out there to everybody, I mean, this would be a great way, we could have. I think it highlights the fact that this is an old concept for Sovryn Tech, but we really need multiple internets. And this is one of those ways, to make that kind of practical and make that happen, especially for smaller groups, which I think is a great thing. As somebody that I live in New Hampshire, and a lot of people know there's a very serious liberty movement in New Hampshire. Something I had been pushing for some time. I don't really interact with the Free State Project much anymore, but something I had been pushing for some time was really New Hampshire needs its own fucking internet, and that's why it baffles me that Free State Project events are all coordinated on Facebook. All the stuff is done through Facebook, and it's just like, are you fucking nuts? I mean, I get it, I guess, if you're trying to get people to move to New Hampshire, but we already have the 20,000 signers, so you don't need to do that anymore. It's like, okay, that's done. Get the fuck off of Facebook now, and let's get serious here. Let's start building an infrastructure for these 20,000 people to get to. And part of that was building, really like a New Hampshire specific internet. I think that's a fine and dandy thing. I think it's a great thing. And, you could do this sort of trick where people have, they have Gotennas, and maybe the base stations could be the various libraries throughout New Hampshire. We know that libraries in New Hampshire in particular are very freedom friendly. There's the one, the Kilton Public Library, which is my library, actually. They stood up against the DHS. They stood up against the Department of Homeland Security and said, hey, we're going to we're running Tor nodes here. Screw you. We're not going to shut them down. And they stood by that, and God damn it, bravo. And the Library Freedom Project run by Alison Macrina, a wonderful woman. She she came there, or I don't know if she came there, but whatever, the Library Freedom Project was backing it. This is a wonderful thing. So the attitudes are there to allow for this sort of thing to happen, to where you could have various base stations, kind of like how radio base camps used to work, where you have a base camp radio, and then all of those can, kind of communicate with each other on their specific channel, and everybody can go out, have quite a few mile radius within which you could work. Same principle. So yeah, I think that would be great. I think, technologies like Gotenna or Open Garden, but more open versions of those really need to happen. I totally agree with that. I think there are people developing it. When you think about like MadeSafe is, I think that is poised to be able to work independently. There doesn't need to be one giant MadeSafe network. That's all open source. So people could set it up in various geographic areas, whatever. Just wonderful things. So I would love to really see that happen. There's a couple other questions here, but I think, boy, I've gone on 45 minutes. So I think that's enough. I will get to the rest of the questions within this. I'll save them for next week. I have tons more questions to get to, and please keep them coming. Like I said, you can send them directly through Patreon if you want. You already have a Patreon account. Like I always tell you, you want to have as few accounts as possible, okay? As is feasible. I mean, yeah, sadly, it seems like we have to have a ton of them anyway just to get anything done, including a Patreon account, right? Again, unless you want to set it up through, there's other means that you can get in touch with me about that. But yeah, just send me a message right through Patreon, and I will get to that question. Sometimes these Q&As will be significantly longer, and I do plan on doing live Q&As here in the future, but that will only be for Patreon subscribers, for Sovryn Tech subscribers, be it through Patreon or perhaps some other means. So anyway, enough of that. This is coming out. I think this will be coming out on a Friday. You'll have a Sex and Science Hour coming to you. You will have a brand new Sovryn Tech tomorrow, episode 185. You're getting tons of stallion these days, folks. So anyway, thank you so much to everybody that donates. Please don't hesitate. Also, if you want to donate more, you can do one-time donations. Just go to donate.zog.ninja. Or wishlist.zog.ninja. All these things really help. Anyway, I had one guy who said that he was tempted to stop funding the show just for various financial reasons, but he felt that the work was so important that he was going to keep doing it anyway. And I am so honored by that. I don't have the words to express how honored I am by that. Thank you so much. All of you Patreon subscribers definitely keep the show alive and kicking and going. And it means the world to me. So anyway, enough of that. Check out, make sure you go to sexandsciencehour.com, hear the episode there, and please, of course, listen to Sovryn Tech tomorrow, episode 185. I got something special cooked up for it. It'll be a good time. So anyway, Carpe Lucem, everybody. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.